Vice President of Government Relations at Hampton University. Prior to that, he worked as a Senior Vice President in commercial banking, as an economist, and as a real estate developer, emphasizing conservative public policy. Among his many positions, he's also been a political analyst on WNIS AM radio and on television, and an award-winning editorial writer. He served as an empowerment commissioner on Governor Allen's Virginia Welfare Reform Commission, played a major role in the formulation of welfare policy recommendations, currently serves on the Governor's Modeling and Simulation Advisory Board, and is a member of the NASA International Oversight Committee on the Mission Advisory Panel. He's received numerous awards for his accomplishments in community service, including a Presidential Certificate of Merit for Community Service awarded by President George Bush in 1992. He has a fascinating personal history. Although he and his family were living quite comfortably in an affluent section of Norfolk, he gave that up in the early 1990s, moved his family to a depressed section of the city in order to see how others live and to see if he could make a difference. And I'm sure he'll expand on that. Bill, why don't you come up and talk to we Republicans this morning?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Talk very loud. Thank you, Mr. Leckler, and it's always a privilege and a pleasure to be able to come out and talk to people who have similar thoughts than I do. I'll just give you a little bit of background of where I am and where I came from. I'm a Kansan. I was born right outside Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. My dad was in World War II, and all his brothers, all 6 of his brothers, and my mom, all 8 of her brothers were in the armed forces. My father-in-law was a Marine. He was one of the first combat African-American Marines that fought in World War II in Guinea. So we had a tremendous history of supporting and loving and appreciating our presence in America. Kansas is a little different than most states. Our legacy comes from soldiers fighting in the Texas, which became the Kansas regiments, right during the Civil War. And when the war ended in Texas, they decided to exercise their Second Amendment rights and go and take their 40 acres on a mule. And they were put in Kansas to fight the Native Americans, so they became Buffalo Soldiers. But what that did to us, it taught us to always be fiercely independent. If you got something done, you had to do it yourself. It was your individual responsibility to take care of yourself and your family. Government was an instrument, but government was not to be trusted. The only part of the Constitution that we liked was the original Constitution. We saw no need for the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment. We felt that we were empowered in ourselves to take care of ourselves by using and fiercely undermining ourselves and our community with the use of the Second Amendment. My dad went on and stayed with the Command General Staff School at Fort Leavenworth for a number of years, so I got a lot of chances to talk to a lot of people and understand a lot of things. And Kansas, a lot of people don't really understand, and I get in conversations with the speaker and with Delegate Lingenfelter with regard to the Civil War, because it's really a conflict. Because a Kansan, I love John Brown, I love what he did and how he taught and what he thought about and how we should empower ourselves. But I also understand the things that went on in Virginia as well. But one of the things that when I moved here from Cleveland, I worked for a money center bank in Cleveland. I was the first African American that was hired there. And I was hired on merit. I didn't believe, I've never taken advantage of any affirmative action. I didn't even know what it was, to tell you honest God truth, because we never focused on that. We never focused on problems. My sisters went to Harvard and MIT. They're both doctors. The other sister went to the University of Kansas. I majored in economics, and I went to Case Western University and studied economics, master's levels there as well. And we never, in fact, when I was in high school, we didn't want our classes integrated. We integrated our schools. I'm 61 years old. We integrated our schools when I was in junior high, and that had to be 1965-ish. And actually, we didn't want that to happen. All we wanted was to have the ability to have the same structures, educators, paid teachers, and books and instructional materials that everybody had. We just wanted fair opportunity, nothing more and nothing less. And we fought for that. But Kansas being fiercely independent, our story has never been told. The first protest regarding lunch counters and things like that was not in North Carolina. It was in Wichita, Kansas in 1963. We fought fiercely to have our own schools and to maintain our own educational basis, and that's why you had the board versus Speaker Board of Education with regard to the educational issues that came up, and then that was distorted. Because in our argument against that system, we did not want to be integrated. We just wanted to fiercely compete in a competitive system, and that got exploited, as well as the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, as far as I'm concerned. So to bring it back up to present day, when I came to Virginia, I was really confused by the stature of my fellow African Americans. I just did not understand people that waited for government to do things. I just didn't understand it. When I moved into Norfolk at the time, I could speak pretty good, I could think pretty good, and I could get things done on my own, and I had a pretty good background and inventory of people that I could talk to. And I'll never forget, his name was Tom Moss, who was a very high Democrat at the time, and Stanley Walker. I went to a breakfast, and they pulled me over and said, "Sir, you talk pretty good, you look pretty good, you've got good educational background, but you've got to get in line before you can run for a public office," which I had no interest in doing whatsoever. I said, "I'm not going to run as a Democrat. I don't believe anything you guys say." And I just said, "I don't believe it. I don't believe any of this stuff. I don't understand why we're sitting here begging government to do what we can do for ourselves.
And do it better.
And do it better, and do it wiser, because in our household, we had success. Our expectations were high, they were clear, they were defined. Good and evil was totally permeated in our brains. We were brought up to understand that we had to do service to our country. We never saw race as an issue, a hurdle, yes, but we were always taught to work twice as hard. Don't worry about that. Don't take advantage of that. Don't do that. And a lot of times when I got to Virginia, they said, well, Bill, you could start this minority company and get these set-asides and do this and do that and become rich. I said, I can't do that. My best friend, when I went to school and worked in the bank in Cleveland, was Michael Gonziorowski, a guy from Czechoslovakia. His family had imported. And the only thing that we thought about is that when we had children, my children were going to go to West Point, University of Virginia, and some other schools, and his kids were going to go too. But we were going to go on a competitive basis. Never thought I were not going to take anything from anybody, because we always saw that as a hindrance to our freedom. And in Virginia, I saw that, and to tell you the honest God truth, I was really disappointed in the Republican Party at the time, because what I saw them doing until I met a man named Vance Wilkins, they were telling me that they could bring in members from the NAACP and the SCLC, the Southern Leadership Conference, and I said, you can't bring those people here. And black or white is irrelevant. What their principles are completely different than what our principles are. I don't understand somebody, and quite frankly, Martin Luther King's family were Republicans. Daddy King was a Republican. My parents grew up in Mississippi and Alabama as Republicans, and that was from the Lincoln legacy. A lot of the soldiers at the time tended to go with the Democratic Party because Harry Truman made my dad and my mama's brothers officers in the Army. And they would never, ever forget that. But their way they thought about things and the way they lived their lives were totally conservative, totally conservative. And that's how we were brought up. And then when I came here, I saw, well, so you need to go over to the NAACP and get this person to do that. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Martin Luther King really never had an affiliation with the NAACP. He really didn't. He was fiercely independent as well. So we always had, I had a conflict between somebody telling me I had to do something or do things and do anything. And even I came out to, when I see a Republican outreach, which we'll talk about as well, I used to see that as you're bringing people in and preachers talking about ex-offenders and drug dealers and drug programs. I don't know these people. Where are these people coming from? My children were taught to be honest. They understood the consequences of every decision they made every day, made them a whole being.
and that they had to be able to be competitive in a global environment. And if you broke the law, if you did bad things would happen to you. And then you would have to go get at the end of the line. I never saw the Republican Party talk about the individuals that I knew, the doctors, the lawyers, the individualists, the entrepreneurs, the capitalists, that were actually competing quite well in Virginia and in American society. I saw people grumbling and grappling for things that I thought were totally unrealistic. We made good friendships. I fought hard, and it was the only one at a certain time, but others. There was Winsome Sears, who ran an election that I ran for her. And I had to argue with the Republican Party because we wanted to run on welfare reform, abortion rights, and prayer in school and charter schools. They told us you can't win like that. I said, oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can. If we go to every church and ask the pastor, the biggest impediment in the African American community today is abortions. It's abortions. Our race is almost at a negative birth rate because abortions are in competition with live births. And I wanted a pastor in a black church, or any church, come to think about it, to tell me, how in the world could you justify taking a life? When all my life and all my existence was taught that life was precious. It was sacred. And you don't mess with it. And even if we were going to be, quote, African American and have a state, a foothold in this great society that we live in, should we have more of us versus less? So we took that campaign to the community. We took the campaign on charter schools. I'm here with Hampton University at the time with Dr. Harvey. I'll just mention him a little bit ago, but we also wanted to start a charter school in the city of Hampton. And we put in $1 million, we built the building, we went in and got the laws changed, we did everything possible to get it started. And that was in 1999, 2000. Once we got the law changed, the Democrats went in, they were kind of in control of General Assembly, I believe, at the time, but we had a measurable amount of Republicans. They shut us down. Not one Republican came to our defense. Not one. Not one said, no, this is the right thing to do. This was 15 years ago. We're talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. Because what we saw as true leaders of America, not of Africa America, but America, that our children, both black and white, would have to be proficient in those particular counties. Otherwise, they didn't. I also knew that everybody that I knew, from Doug Wilder to myself, to Dr. Harvey, to Gerald Jones, to Ken Melvin, to everybody that I knew, all my friends sent their kids to private school. They didn't send their kids to public schools. These are African Americans. We didn't do that. We sent our kids so they could get the best opportunity that they could possibly get. And unfortunately, when we argue, and people get upset with me sometimes about arguing about public schools, I'm really not arguing about public schools. Public schools can be the very, very best. And you can tell where you have a good public school. You'll see right now a little baseball sign-up list, because that's a commitment, and parents have to make commitments to that. So I live in neighborhoods that have those kind of signs out there. But in the Virginia inner cities, I would never put my child in a Norfolk or Richmond or Petersburg public schools. And it's not because of the brick and mortar. It's not because of the teachers that are there. It's not because of the books. It's the values. It's the values that we were taught are totally a thesis to what they're doing now. And then when we stood up and talked about that and said, no, we're not going to do it, and we're going to do it, we're going to do it this way, again, I was disappointed in the Republican Party because they set back. We argued a lot with Mark Early when he was running for his governorship, and we told him and advised him, why are you doing this? Why are you going out and reaching out to, and I'm not saying this group or that group, but to liberals? These people will never believe what you're saying, black or white. They're not going to do that. Well, we're going to change. They're going to change. No, you are going to change. You're going to change and lower and devalue your beliefs into what they believe. That's the only way it's going to go. That's one direction. And then they ended up stabbing him in the back. I talked to my good friend Jared Gallon. I noticed maybe a month or two ago that he went down to Norfolk State. For what? And I'm not against that. I'm just telling you, for what? You have 0 votes there. You have universities like Hampton University that you look at, and I'm just bringing that up as an example, and if you look in the records, you'll see that 60% of our donation go to Republicans. You'll see that less than 2% of Norfolk State go to Republicans, and then you go look at the demographics. You're not going to get any votes there, so why are you wasting your time?
Why are you wasting your time when you have very good, if you want to do this outreach, and a lot of times the party, this party here right now, they'll say we need to have African American and ethnic outreach. African Americans and Hispanics, et cetera, et cetera. I don't participate in that because it's a wrong principle. I want my children to believe as I live, and I'm not perfect, but I do believe that I have to be an outreach to everybody. Because if I sit here and say, well, we're going to have an African-American outreach in the Republican Party of Virginia Beach, then I'm separating myself. I'm isolating myself from the whole. Why in the hell would I want to do that? I don't want to do that. I want to reach out. I think one of the problems with our party, and you can look at it up and down the road, is that capital and access to capital and intellectual capital, you have to understand that's what makes the world turns now. And then if you can't read or write, or for years I beat the drum that Norfolk had graduation rates of African Americans of 30%. I was called a liar, insane. I'm a trained economist. I know how to go get charts and look and see what they are. But even more than that, I know I can look in the community because I moved into an inner city community. I lived there for 10 years. I saw the degradation. I saw the dysfunction. I saw where you had 80 and 90% illegitimacy and nobody saying it's wrong. I saw where kids were just failing miserably, but passing through the classes. And then, you know, then they have all of these outreach things, and all it is a big fraud. So instead of saying that 300 African Americans graduated with a B average, probably in the whole Hampton Roads region, people don't want to hear that. 17 in Norfolk a couple of years ago. 17 African American men graduated from the 4th largest public school system in Virginia with a B average. And a B average that's watered down. There's no gimmicks to that. Now, I'll answer your questions. I know people got questions. I have my books, and I have all my statistics and all that kind of stuff. But what that did was, it disappointed me because I knew that our workforce was going to be challenged. And I understood the difference between being able to achieve and not achieve, and what criminology and what went with that. Even if you look at the numbers in terms of the voting for the last couple of election terms, in the election with Deeds and McDonald, Bob McDonald, good friend, a good governor, good conservative, as far as I'm concerned, he received 9% of the African American vote. Even when George Allen lost to Webb, he got 12%. When George Allen beat Robb in 2000, he received 16%. Because that was when he was at the pinnacle of doing the things that everybody wanted. They wanted good schools. They wanted criminals to go to jail and stay in jail. They wanted people with child pornography to be put out of the system. They wanted charter schools, and as Mr. Allen at that time was talking about, champion schools. They wanted their neighborhoods to be safe. Freedom is not free. It's cost. I grew up in a legacy when my folks were freed as slaves. They did 4 things. First thing they did was they went back and found their families. The second thing they did was they armed themselves so they wouldn't be put under chains again by anybody. Third thing they did, they went out and farmed to find a way to take care of their families. The fourth thing they did was educate their families and make education the pinnacle of what had to happen. That was all undermined when Democrats came in with the great deal and the big deal and all these kinds of issues that made government more responsible for ourselves and our community than ourselves. And in my experience in living in the inner city, I never got one rock thrown at my house by the people who lived there. I had drug dealers and other people. They respected me. They respected me, number one, because they knew I was armed with a license. and no nonsense came to me, or my children, because they knew I wasn't playing. You mess with me, I'll kill you. You mess with my children, I'll kill you and your family. So don't mess with me. And that's the way life is. I'm not going out picking any fights. I'm not going out trying things, but I got that respect for doing that. But at the end of the day, if you look at education, you look at the things that we need to do, you look at how America is coming together. We don't talk about the fact that in Hampton Roads, if you look at the top wealthiest neighborhoods by zip codes in our region, you'll see that where I live in northern Suffolk, 26% of the folks that live there Average income is $70,000. That's number 5 in the region. Our value of our houses are $297,000. That's in northern Suffolk. You look in zip code 3221 in Chesapeake, you'll see that 28% of the folks that live there that look like me, their average incomes are $64,000, $63,000. In zip code 23464 in Virginia Beach, their average income is $65,000. African American people look like me. Why aren't Republicans reaching out to these people? Why are you going down in zip code 23540? There's nothing there. Now, do you want to teach people what's right and what's wrong? You want to tell people what the truth is? Get off your ass and go to work? Get up in the morning and go to school? Go to work? When I was asked by a commission that Governor Allen put at the time, with a host of mayors, and Governor Wilder was also a big friend and a big help to me, and a very conservative Democrat, by the way. They asked me, what was the 3 things wrong with the inner city that I was living in? I said, real simple. Jobs is number 1, jobs is number 2, and jobs is number 3. If a man doesn't have the ability to take care of his family, he doesn't have anything. A lot of people, when we saw Martin Luther King marching, a very decent, great man that I respect totally. But we never understood when we were living in our neighborhoods and living in Kansas City that, why would you get beat? We didn't believe in getting beat. We believe somebody hit you, you hit them back. Somebody shoot you, you shoot them back. But Martin Luther King was a very, 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 very religious guy. But at the end of the day, when he was in Memphis, when he died, he wasn't talking about equal rights. He wasn't talking about using the Constitution to make us better, or some law to make us vote when you don't vote anyhow. What he talked about in the same old Jeffersonian kind of way, he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that all men are endowed with inalienable rights, among these include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if a man doesn't have a job or income, he has neither life nor liberty or the opportunity for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. Martin Luther King talked about getting people to go to work. That's why the black community and leadership in the black community kind of walked away from him. Because he walked away from this entitlement, takers society. Because he knew at the end of the day that that was going to be the way that lifted up anybody. That isn't what he taught his children. That isn't what his daddy taught him. And a lot of people don't like hearing it. I am hated more by some of my own people because they're saying you're telling secrets. I'm not telling those secrets. It's just the way I was raised. I'm raised on an issue where things get done, where you're measured by your activities, good and bad. There is good and there is evil. It's evil for us not to teach our kids right and wrong. That there is a God, somebody's God in heaven above, that's going to hold you accountable for what you do. And then there are leaders in our community that's going to do the same thing. But I've kind of drifted away from the Republican Party because we don't talk about that anymore. We try to we appease people. We want to get along with people. You know, I never really, and go back and tell them you want to, but I'll never forget when Governor Gilmore, he hired the head of the NAACP in Virginia, who fought us tooth and nail over all the issues that we were fighting for with George Allen. Truth and lending. You do your time, crime, do the time. Black, white, don't matter. If you don't go to school, there's reasons for you not. If you don't want to go to work and you're physically able to go to work, you don't eat. Then they hired her as head of the Minority Business Enterprise. I'm saying, what? I was told to be quiet. Dr. Harvey was told, no, step back, things will work out. Things didn't work out. They're worse. They're worse. Right now in our public school system in the inner cities, our kids are not graduating. And I'm an academician. I'm on the board of CNU. I'm an academician at Hampton University. I see it in our ranks, where we have, especially for African American males, they're just not performing. And they're not performing because they're not being challenged. And then you, as leaders, community leaders, some elected officials, you tolerate this nonsense. You'll let them dummy down a police test. Kids or young men, black or white, can't pass simple math tests, can't read. And then you're going to change the test. And then you're going to say that, well, the score from 90 to 100 to 94, well, that's not an 80 anymore. Let's make it 90. Or in Norfolk or Portsmouth, well, if you don't do anything, we'll give you 60. We'll give you 60. We'll give you something. And then you turn your corner, and that person got a gun right at your face. And then we will look at it. Over the past 27 years in America, FBI statistics, 252,533 African Americans have died on the streets of America. Let me tell you that again. 252,533. I think the city of Portsmouth is 100,000, Roanoke is 92, Suffolk is 81, Chesapeake is 218,000. Why in the hell am I worried about Bin Laden when we have hell raging right here in our own neighborhoods? 6,000 to 7,000 people like me a year is dying in the streets. We have uncontrollable neighborhoods. They're out of control. And that nastiness has now snaked its way up through government, where we'll pay government folks like the Stop Organization hundreds of millions of dollars, and they can't even do what they're supposed to do, and the executives are getting paid $100,000, and we say nothing. So I'm drifting away from the Republican Party because we won't stand it to it. Even here in Virginia Beach, I know you don't like it, but it's just the truth. Your two largest employers, the city of government and the Navy, or whatever, DOD. We have to do better. We have to find ways. When businesses get in trouble and can't afford to do what they need to do, they can't give their employees increases. You have to cut. You have to reduce your expenditures. You have and that's all. And if you want to do something different, I'm a banker. You can't cut the income side of your income statement, but you can control your outside, your expenses. You start looking at your expenses. If I get a credit in banking, if I get a company that's accredited, they got a problem, I'd say, bring your checkbook here. We're going to figure out a way how to cut this down. You're going to pay me. And then you're going to figure out how you're going to do the other thing after you delete your dividend and things. But I didn't come here to punish, because there's a lot of good things going on, but there's a lot of bad things. This is not the America that I was born in 1950, in a segregated community. I remember when I was 10 years old, my dad was going off to reserve duties. And he told me we had to take my mom down to Natchez, Mississippi, and she was pregnant. And so he told my brother to be the point, and I was the rear guard. I was the point, and my brother was the rear guard. And he said that when the train crossed the Mason-Dixon line in Little Rock, he didn't want anything to happen to our mother, and it's your responsibility. At 10 years old, when the conductor said, well, you folks got to go back and to move to another car. At the point, I went and checked out the car. It was hot and no air conditioning. I went back and told that conductor, I'm not moving nowhere. I don't care what you do. Or what you can do, you can call my daddy. He's on his way to Europe. Or you can call the commander at Fort Leavenworth, and you can call them. Or you're going to call somebody. But we're not going to move. So the whole thing is, they stopped the train. I had some guards, and they called the police, and they called the sheriff. And people were just frightened of the conductors and the African-American waiters and things. They were just shocked. They thought they were going to get killed. But we were taught to live free or die. Stand for something. Be something. And have traditions and values that you can respect. So I'm going to end it now. If anybody have any questions, and if anybody wants the statistics of what I had, I'm more than willing to share those with you. But at the end of the day, we have to do better as Americans.